Okay, so we're going to build something really simplistic here. Let me just show you what I have here.
First, you have to install it.
Yeah, I have it installed already, so I'm not going to install it here. You guys can install it. Let me just show you what I'm doing here. Very simple site.
Is this recorded?
I'm recording it now. Okay, so I have a site that I created, localhost 3000, real simple. Here's my home page with 3 products. And if I drill down over here and I give an ID, I'll get just 1 product. Now, the difference here in terms of what we were doing before is that our data is actually going to be coming from a database, and this is what we're going to be building out. So let me kill this, and we're going to start over here. And let's kill this. So here I am. In an empty site, Node-Postgres-Demo. Again, you're going to have Postgres installed. And again, once you end up getting Postgres installed, one of the things that you're going to be able to do is that you're going to be able to type in pSQL to get into Postgres. And one of the things you're going to be able to do is to do things like, create database. And it's going to end up creating a database for you. You're going to be able to connect to that database. Okay? You're going to be able to look at the tables from the database. So a couple of commands. You'll end up looking at this in the workshop. D is going to show me all my tables. I don't have any tables. Create table foods. Name text. Now if I do D, I'll see that I have foods. I could also say D foods, and it'll tell me what's in this table foods. So this is kind of what we're going to be looking at. I could end up, I always forget if it's / or \\. I could get out of this by doing this. Again, if I ever want to go into it, I could do pSQL. And again, we'll make sure that you get this installed. This is something that just you need to do. Again, sometimes a little bit of a pain point, usually not too bad. Okay, so having said that, what I want to do here is, let me go up 1 level. Okay, so here's my demo. Don't have anything in here. So one of the things that I want to do is I'm going to build a little Express app. So I'm going to say npm install, and I'm going to end up installing Express. And let me actually do this. So I have my package JSON file, npm init with just the default settings. Now if I do this, I'll see that I've got my package JSON file. And I'm going to say npm install, and I'm going to install Express. And I think the only things I'm going to need for this demo is Express, Postgres. Now again, this is not Postgres that's running on your machine. This is basically using Node to access Postgres, okay? So there are going to be underlying Postgres commands that you're going to be able to call, and the way that you're going to be able to call that is that you're going to have a Postgres server running, okay? That's what's going to happen when you end up installing Postgres. And your Node server, okay? Important to make this distinction, your Node server is going to be able to access this Postgres server and run queries. So I'm going to need this Postgres. Again, this is not the database Postgres. This is going to give me access so I can end up accessing a Postgres server that's running. Okay, on my machine, I know Postgres is running with, I think it's either this guy, maybe it's not, maybe this is, yeah. So this is my Postgres that's running up here. We'll see what happens when I kill it.
If you see it running up there, how can you access it through your command line?
Well, you should be able to just do pSQL, but you could also just actually say open pSQL, and you'll be able to access it from there. But there's another command that you could use to basically access it from anywhere as well. And that's actually, I think, in the workshop as well. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm going to install Postgres, and the only other thing I'm going to put in here is swig, and I'm going to do a save. Okay, I'm going to go up over here, and just to sort of get started, I'm going to go over here, and here's my package JSON. The only other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say start dev. I want to deploy this too. So I'm going to say start dev, and this is going to be nodemon server JS. And if I go back to my command line and I say npm run start dev, it'll start this and it'll say that it can't find server, and I'll go back over here and I'll add my server. I'm going to start out by putting this all in one file, and then I'm going to end up separating it out. So what am I going to have here to get started? Well, one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm going to say constant Postgres equals require Postgres. Now you could look at the documentation for Postgres, but one of the things that you'll end up finding with this is that what you end up doing is you basically create what's called a Postgres Client. Okay? This is basically something in your code that's going to allow you to access a Postgres database. If you can access a Postgres database, what you need is the address of the database. Again, this is going to work because there's a Postgres server that's running. Okay? There's going to be some other slides that I'm going to explain this. I'm going to... oh, thank you. And let's actually see if this... No errors, so that's a good sign. What I want to do here is I'm going to say client equals new Postgres client. Okay? Now what goes in here? This is going to be the address of my server. Okay? A server is basically the way that our Node server listens. We're going to have a Postgres server that's going to be listening. Okay? Right now we have a Postgres server that's running. Now you have to know that when you end up addressing, you make a request to a web page, it starts with HTTP. When you're making an address, when you want to access Postgres, okay, this is running locally. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in a database that doesn't exist. I'm going to call this Node-Postgres-Demo. Laura, you're typing along with me? You know I don't like that. No, I'm just kidding. I don't care. So what I'm going to do here, let's just see what happens. That runs as well. Okay, fine. Okay. Now what I want to do here is I want to be able to connect to the database. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, look, there's a Postgres database out there somewhere that's running. By the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be on my machine. It could be somewhere else. Okay? And I'm going to end up accessing it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say client connect. This is something that's asynchronous. Okay? The fact that it's asynchronous means that it might work, it might not work. Okay? If it works, nothing will end up getting sent to this callback. If it doesn't work, we'll be able to go and say console.log and look at what the error is. Okay? Nothing happens asynchronously here. It just says, hey, look, I might not be connecting. Now I'm connecting. Okay? So I go back over here, and I end up getting an error message. Okay? Tells me you have a database that doesn't exist. So I'm going to go back to my pSQL. What's the name of my database? Node-Postgres-Demo. I know that Postgres doesn't let me do dashes. That's why I put in the underscores here, I think. And I'm going to go pSQL, and I'm going to say create database Node-Postgres-Demo. Okay? Now again, nodemon doesn't know that I did that. So I'm going to kill that and just run it again. And now I see that I have no error message. Okay? Good. So we could connect to a database. Let's just pretend for the moment that what we're going to do here is after we end up connecting to the database, we'll say, hey, look, if you don't have an error, then what we're going to do is run some kind of query against the database. Now, I've got a client that's connected. A connected client can run a query. What's my query going to be? I'll say select star from foods. Okay? Again, this is something that's asynchronous. Very common pattern, error, results. Again, I didn't write the API. This is the way the API was written. Again, if you were running this in a console, it'd be very simple. If I go back to this console, and I go over here and I say, not only do I create the database, but I want to connect to Node-Postgres-Demo. It says now I'm connected to it. I say select star from foods. There's nothing asynchronous. I'm just doing it from my command line. Here, right, we don't want to tie up the node process. So whoever ended up writing this library, okay, made it so that this is going to spawn another thread behind the scenes. And when our event loop is ready, we're going to be able to deal with this data. So let's actually test something out. We'll say if error console log error. Okay? And if I go back here, I'll see my error. Relation foods does not exist. Okay? Well, let's sort of separate this out a little bit. There's a number of things that we could end up doing here. Okay? I've got a connection to my database. I'm querying my database, and I end up getting an error. Right? By the way, I could get this to work. Watch this. I'm going to go back here. Create table foods, name, text. Now I've got a table. Now again, NodeMon doesn't know that I did this. But now when I run this, I won't see anything. I don't have any errors. Okay? So I'm going to go over here, and I'll put an else here. This means I have some results. And I'll say console.log results.rows. Okay? And I should actually call this. I'm going to just call this result. I think that makes a little bit more sense. Okay? How many rows do I have? What am I going to see? An empty array because I've got no data there. Okay? Again, just to sort of beat a dead horse, and then we'll actually start setting this up a little bit better. I'll say insert into foods, name, values, bar, and buzz. And I'll go back over here, and again, I'll kill this because Postgres doesn't know, NodeMon doesn't know we made that change. And I'll do this, and you'll see that I've got two items here, which are just objects, and I can look at these objects. Good. Okay? Let's think of something a little bit more real world here. So what I want to do here, instead of just connecting here, let's modify a couple of things. First of all, when I go and deploy this somewhere, I don't want this to be my database because it's not going to find anything on localhost. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say process environment database URL. Okay? And I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go to my package JSON, and I'll say database URL. And there's a reason why I'm choosing this, although I'm not going to give it away at the moment. And again, I'm going to have to restart things, but this should put me in the same boat that I was in before. And let's see, usually this happens because it doesn't like something in here. No, that actually looks okay. Database URL command not found. Database URL equals. Okay. So this has to be my environment variable that I'm setting up here, and now I'm in the same boat that I was before. Good. Okay. Let's think about what we might want to do here. So maybe we want to connect. I'm going to actually go over here, and I'm going to create a const called connect. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to move this code that I have here up here. So that I could connect. Now, again, if I run this now, nothing's going to happen because I created this connect function. I'm not doing anything with it. Let me just call it. Okay, same boat that I was before. Okay. Now let's do something a little bit different here.
So far, not an Express. This has nothing to do with Express.
We haven't done absolutely nothing with Express, which is what we're going to end up doing. Okay. One of the things that I might want to do here is I might want to go and when I end up connecting, maybe one of the things that I want to do, and I could do this in one shot here, but let's pull this stuff out. And we'll go over here and we'll say if not error. Let's have another environment variable, okay? Because one of the things that we're going to have to do is that when we go and deploy this somewhere, we're going to have to make sure that our tables end up getting created if they don't exist. Let's pretend that we're not using this foods table here for a second. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have another const. I'm going to call this seed. It's going to do more than seed. It's going to actually not only seed our database, but it's actually going to create our tables for us. We're not going to want to do this all the time. Okay? We want to have some control over it. So for starters, I'm just going to say if process environment seed, and I'll say console.log seed some data. Now if I go back here, I'm not going to see that message show up. Okay? But if I go over here to my package JSON, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to set seed equal to true. I could actually just set it equal to anything. Okay, again, when you change the package.json, you got to go and restart it again. And now I see seed some data. So what do we want to do when we seed some data? Well, what I want to do is I want to actually go and not only create the tables, but actually put some data in it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a const here. And in this const, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a little bit of SQL. So I'll go over here and I'll say my query is going to be, and I'm going to use my backticks, which is going to make my life a little bit easier. And I'll go over here and I'll say drop table if exists. This is something we might have actually even looked at before. So if the table products exists, delete it. Okay? One of the things that I'm trying to do here is that I want to get a fresh start of my data. I want to recreate the table. Okay? Again, I don't want to do this all the time. But again, if I'm running this for the first time, I want to make sure that I have the tables that I want and the data that I want so I could start writing some code. So I'm going to specify if table exists, drop table if table exists products, and I'll say create table products. Now with SQL, the syntax, with Postgres, Syntax is a little bit different than with SQLite. Slight difference, ID, and if you want to create a auto-incrementing ID, you actually say serial primary key. Also, we're going to do a name, which is going to be text. That's going to be a semicolon. There's nothing that prevents me from having multiple lines here. Okay? And what I'm going to do here, if process environment seed, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to seed. What this should end up doing here is nothing, because what I really want to do here is I want to say the client, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to run a query with this query. Again, this ends up runs asynchronously. I'm either going to have an error or result. And for the moment, let's just say if error, console.log error. So now if this goes to run, I'm going to go, it doesn't look like I have an error here. If I go back to my command line and I end up looking over here, D tells me, it's going to tell me my tables. Notice I didn't create this, but this is what actually will create the ID for the products. You don't have to do that. But if I say select star from products, I end up getting no products here. Now I want to seed 3 different products here. So what I'm going to end up doing here is that not only am I going to end up creating the table, but I'm going to say insert into products, name, values. What's a good name for a product? No doubt. Okay? And I'm going to do a bar, and I'll do a baz. And if I go back here, this should have run, and hopefully I don't have an error. Select star from products. Here's my foo, my bar, and my baz. And one thing that you might want to do here, and this is something that you can do, is that you might want to know the IDs of this that ended up coming into this database. So one thing you might want to do here is, hey, look, if you have an error, do this. Otherwise, do something else. Okay? And so what I'll do for the moment, I'm just going to say console.log result. What does result look like? So the result tells me I've got an insert command. I've got some rows here that look pretty empty. Well, one of the things you could do here, which is kind of interesting, is that you could say, hey, look, not only insert this, and usually you'll see this could be lowercase too. Usually you'll put your SQL in uppercase, but I screwed that up already, so no reason to change it here. I'm going to say returning ID. Returning ID. Now I'm going to run this, and notice when I look at my rows, I see the IDs of these things that ended up getting created. So as an example here, if I was to go in here and say result.rows for each row, console.log row ID, I should see the 3 IDs that ended up getting created for me. Okay? So what did I do here? This gave me basically just the ability to go and seed my data. This is probably not the place for this code. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say const db equals require /db. I get an error that doesn't exist. I'm going to end up going and creating this. Now that error goes away, but really what I want to do is I want to take all this SQL-related stuff. Let me paste this down here to make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to take all this stuff, bring it here, put it in here. So I've got my seed, I've got my connect, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say module.exports, and for now, I'm just going to export connect. Okay? And so what this is going to allow me to do is I'm going to go over here to my server, and I'm going to specify, hey, look, DB connect, and I'm in the same boat that I was before. Okay? Now, what do I really want to be able to do? Well, two things, right? I want to be able to get products, okay? I also want to be able to get a product. So again, without even putting any of my Express stuff in here, let me go over here and actually, let's put the Express stuff in here just to sort of get it set up. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put in const Express equals require Express. And just for starters, I'll say const app equals Express. And I'll say app.listen, and I'm going to set up a port here. I'll say const port process environment port or 3000. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say listen on port. And I'll say console.log listening on port. And we'll see what that ends up buying us here. Same thing going on here. Okay? So what do I want to do here? Well, I want to make for starters, a get request to slash. And what I want to do here is that I want to go over here and I want to say, well, DB get products. Okay? Now, again, this is going to be an asynchronous operation because, again, any I/O is going to be asynchronous. Okay? Anything with Postgres is going to be asynchronous. So what do I want to do here is I'm going to expect to get back either an error or products. And I'll go over here and I'll say if error, okay? And I'll say I can use next, and if I call next with an error, I can see what that error is. Now, I'm going to show you something that I do sometimes. I do return here. The only reason I do the return there, returns and callbacks mean nothing. The only thing that this is doing is saying, if there's an error, get out of this callback. I'm done with this callback. Okay? Saves me the trouble of putting in an else. If I make it down here, then I'm going to say response.send products. Okay? Now, I'm never going to make it down here anyway, because if I do this, I'm actually have a syntax error here. I do this sometimes. This is fat arrow. Okay? And if I go to my browser, and I'll go over here and I'll say localhost 3000. Ooh. Get products is not a function. Let's go over and do get products. So what are we going to do with get products? Get products is going to be real simple. Get products is just going to use the client. Now again, keep in mind that get products is being passed a callback function. When I end up calling get products, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say client, I want you to query select star from products. And again, this ends up getting a callback, either an error or a result. Now again, if I didn't do anything here, and I go back and I look at this, because get products, it's not enough to put the method here. You've got to do this. Now I'm going to go back here, and I'm just going to be hanging for 1,000,000 hours because I didn't deal with my callback, right? I passed my callback in. I didn't do anything with my callback. And simply what I'm going to do with my callback is if there's an error, I'm going to return callback. Actually, I could even do it simpler. Well, not really. If there's an error, I'm going to do a callback with the error. Otherwise, I'm going to do callback, no error, but I just want to get my products. So I don't want the result. I want the result.rows. Those are going to be my products. Now I can see my 3 products coming back. Okay? By the way, what would happen if I had an error here? Select star from X products. Okay? I get this error. This relation doesn't exist. Now let me just show you something. Even this early in the process, okay? This early in the process, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do a git init. Git.add dot, git.commit, first commit. Okay? Heroku create node Postgres-Demo. Okay? Created it for me. Git.push Heroku master. Pushing this to Heroku this early on. Run some things. I'm going to go over here and say Heroku.open, or I could just go to this website, but this is just an easy command that'll actually open this up. And Heroku is going to be opened, and I'm going to be sitting here for a little while. And eventually I'm going to get an error message here. But what I want to show you is that if I end up going over here and I say Heroku Logs, it's going to go over here. And let's actually see if we get a little bit more stuff here. So here I've got an error. Let's see if we could find some useful information. And it's still, okay, so here's my application error. Yeah, I think one of the problems that I have here.
You didn't have to create a profile, right?
Nothing. Let's go over here and let's actually make a change here. So let's actually say if in fact there was an error connecting to the client, let's put an else here. And I'm going to add this. Let's just see if that helps give us any additional information. So let's see what happens here. So here I could actually see that it's trying to connect to some local host. Basically, I don't have Postgres set up as a server. Okay? So let me show you something. If I log into Heroku, I could go and I could find my site. So this is Node-Postgres-Demo. And there are add-ons that are here. And very simply, I'm going to say I want to add on Postgres. Well, it gives me a free version. And what this automatically will do for me, I don't really want to show it on the screen, but what it will automatically do is it'll end up setting up environment variables for me for that database URL for that server. Okay? If I go, and by the way, it'll restart my app as well. So I'm going to go over here. I'll say Heroku Logs. Now I don't see that error message. Let's see if I see anything else. Let's do one other thing here. I'm going to go over here. Let's actually try to access this page. Okay? I want to show you something interesting. Notice when I was local, I got this error. Notice over here, I don't. The reason why I don't is that when you're in a development environment, okay, Express will actually output your error message. When you're in a production environment, there's a setting where Express won't do that. Now, if you want to get this message to see what it is, we might actually be able to go over here and get it. And we do end up getting that error message. But just to show you something, if you wanted a little bit of a different error message, one of the things I could do here is I could go up to my server, and this I think was in one of the workshops. I can do an app.use, and this is a special piece of middleware, okay, that I put in, and instead of it having 3 parameters, it has 4. And what I'm going to do here, this middleware will only get hit if, in fact, you call next with an error. And now I'm going to go over here, and just to show something, I'll say response.send error. Let's make sure this works locally before I deploy it.
Don't you need URL
For what?
for the use?
No. Right? When we spoke about middleware, if we don't put anything in there, it's for every path. Right? And this is only specifically if you have an error. Okay? The way that Express works is that it's going to look and see if there's a piece of middleware that takes 4 arguments. If it does, it's going to call it. And notice I could see my error. By the way, notice I don't see a very interesting error message here. I've shown you this before. This is because, for whatever reason, maybe for security, that message is not actually iterable. If I just output the message, I'll see X products doesn't exist. And just to sort of show you this, add error handler. And I'm not saying that you want to do this because this gives away some information about your application. Git.push Heroku master. And now if I go back here, my error message here, give it a sec. Is X products doesn't exist, but let's do this. Let's fix that. So we're not calling X products. We're going to call products. Again, locally, good. Let's go over here. Who yawned? I'm not even going to say anything. Moro, find out who that was. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say fix SQL, git.push Heroku master. You guys like to see the deployment? I think it helps. I always know what the answer is before I ask. Terrible. So I think it makes a huge difference because then you know, hey, look, this is not, you could do something that's not just isolated to your own machine, which is good. So now if I rerun this, different error message. Products doesn't exist. Watch this. In my Postgres, by the way, I'm not going to show this. Well, I guess I sort of have to. Here's I guess you can't see the whole thing, but this automatically got created when I ended up provisioning Postgres. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say seed. Doesn't really matter what I call it. These are just string values. It's just going to ask if it's truthy. By the way, my app will restart. And if I give it a second, or 2, 3, now I've got my 3 products. Now, let's do one more thing, just so you could see some parameters. Let's also have another route. And we'll go over here, and we'll say app.get/id. What do we want to do here? Well, we're going to hope that we have some method called getProduct. What are we going to pass? We'll say request params.id, and we just want to have an integer there, times 1. And again, we expect a callback, this time either an error or a product. And we'll go over here and we'll say, if you have an error, we'll go over here and we'll say response dot, excuse me, we'll say return next with the error. And if we don't, we'll say response.send product. Now, I hope everyone's aware at this point that if I did have a templating engine set up, I could send these values back and send them back in a template, okay? Right now, I'm just sending them back as just JSON data.
And when we're asked to do API data or whatever.
So this is what API data is going to look like. So you saw that in your, if you did the, so when you're seeing in some of the tests for the checkpoint, it says just send back the data. Again, usually you'll end up doing this if you're making a call to an API. Again, I could set up Swig pretty fast to do this if we want to. But I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to send back this product. Now, if I go over here and I put in 1, it's going to tell me getProduct is not a function. And so how do we do this? So the only difference here is when we call getProduct. Again, we could copy and paste, but why bother, right? The more you end up typing, the more muscle memory you have. ID with a callback. This is going to be client.query, okay? And what we're going to do here, instead of actually going in, and I could concatenate a string, you really don't want to do that. It's pretty bad practice. Opens up a lot of things that can be problematic. I'm going to say select star from products where ID is equal to $1. Well, what the hell is $1? I have the ability to send a collection here. Could be more than one thing, but I'm just going to pass in this ID that was passed here. So when you call query, you could do more than one thing if there are some parameters. Okay, this will be in the workshop too. I'm going to go over here. And again, what do I get back here? Error or result. So this is kind of interesting. What I want to do here right off the bat is if you have an error, I'm going to go return callback an error. Now, I don't expect this to necessarily be an error, but what else might I consider an error? Well, how about if result.rows.length is equal to 0? And I'll go over here and I'll say return callback. Let's just do this. No record for that ID. We'll see if it works. Otherwise, we'll call our callback no error, result.rows 0, which should be our one product. So let's just test that out, see if that works. And what I forget to do, which I always do, get product. So now I've got that. If I end up putting in 5, I get nothing. And let's just see why that's the case. Well, the reason why that's the case is that I'm looking for this error message. So if I end up saying, let's try this. So if I do have an error, let me actually go back here, and I'll actually create an error, new error. This is something that's built into JavaScript. This is going to be an error with this error message. No record for that ID. Okay? So in this case, I could go over here. Add route for get product, git.push, Heroku to Heroku. I'm pushing my master branch. Now if I give it a second, and I go over here, this should still end up working. And if I go here, this should end up working as well. And if I go here, this should tell me no record for that ID. So again, this is just a demo to sort of show you how you could end up using Postgres, and also a little bit to show deployment. But if you wanted to, you could always go in here to your server. We're not doing it, but we could bring in swig, require swig, and set it up so that we weren't just sending, but we were rendering different templates, and you've gotten some experience with that already. Okay? So let me stop this lecture.